The hunt begins. The jungle pulsed with life, the thick canopy above shrouding the landscape in perpetual twilight. Strange bioluminescent plants cast eerie glows, illuminating the undergrowth where unseen predators lurked. It was a world of hunters and hunted, a brutal balance of survival. Joran crouched low, her slitted golden eyes scanning the terrain for movement. Her sleek, muscular form was built for speed and precision, a true apex predator of the Zevrin people. She exhaled slowly, steadying her grip on her spear. The prey was near. Then, she saw it. A human. He moved with quiet, deliberate steps, his breath controlled, his posture unafraid. Strange. Most creatures on this world fled at the scent of a Zevrin. But this one stood firm, his blue eyes scanning the surroundings with an intelligence that sent a ripple of intrigue through her. She had heard the stories of humans, soft creatures from a water world, weak and slow, incapable of matching a Zevrin in combat. And yet, the way he moved contradicted everything she had been taught. He wasn't prey. He was a hunter. Joran's lips curled in a smirk. This would be entertaining. She struck. Her body exploded into motion, a blur of speed and grace. Her spear thrust forward, aiming for his heart. A clean kill. Or it should have been. Instead, he twisted at the last moment, dodging her strike by inches. His reflexes were fast, unnaturally fast. Before she could recover, he countered. A low sweep with his leg knocked her off balance, and she tumbled onto her back, her spear flying from her grasp. Joran snarled, rolling to regain her footing, but the human was already there, pinning her down. His weight pressed against her, his breath hot against her ear. "Nice try," he murmured. "But you hesitated." Joran's mind reeled. No one, not even the greatest warriors of her kind, had ever reacted fast enough to avoid her strike, let alone counter her so effortlessly. She glared up at him, anger and something else burning in her chest. "Get off me, human," she growled. To her surprise, he complied, stepping back and offering a hand. Joran hesitated before slapping it away, rising to her feet with as much dignity as she could muster. "Who are you?" she demanded. The human grinned. "Ethan Cole. Survivalist. And you are?" Joran narrowed her eyes. "Joran. Huntmaster of the Zevrin." Ethan crossed his arms. "Huntmaster? Then I assume you were hunting me." Joran bristled. "I was testing you." He chuckled. "Testing, huh? Is that what you tell yourself when your prey fights back?" Joran's tail flicked in agitation. This human was insufferable. "You are, not like I expected," she admitted. "Your kind is supposed to be weak." Ethan shrugged. "Common misconception. We're stubborn. We adapt." Joran studied him for a long moment. Something about him unsettled her. He should have been easy to kill. Instead, he had bested her, a Zevrin Huntmaster. It was unthinkable. For the first time in her life, she found herself truly curious. "Perhaps I misjudged you, human," she said finally. Ethan's smirk didn't waver. "Glad you're catching on. Now, what say we call a truce? I've been stuck on this planet alone for weeks. Could use an ally." Joran's instincts screamed against it. But her pride demanded she learn how he had bested her. "Fine. But only until I figure you out." Ethan winked. Looking forward to it. Joran wasn't sure if she had just made a deal with a worthy adversary or the most frustrating creature in the galaxy. Either way, the hunt was far from over. Predators and prey. Joran stalked through the dense jungle, her golden eyes never leaving the human beside her. Ethan moved with surprising ease, his steps calculated, his breathing controlled. It was unnatural. Humans weren't supposed to be this capable. She had watched countless prey fall to her kind, creatures that ran, creatures that begged. Ethan did neither. He had looked her in the eyes and met her challenge. No fear. And now, they walked side by side. Joran tightened her grip on her reclaimed spear, feeling an unfamiliar itch beneath her skin. A warrior's shame. She should have already killed him. And yet, something about him intrigued her, made her hesitate. Something on your mind? Ethan asked, breaking the silence. Joran bristled. I still don't understand how you bested me. Ethan smirked. You made a mistake. Joran's tail flicked. I do not make mistakes. You hesitated, Ethan said, his voice maddeningly calm. Just for a second. But in a fight, a second is all it takes. Joran growled. I did not. Ethan stopped abruptly and raised a hand. Shoo. Joran's ears twitched, her warrior instincts instantly on alert. Something was wrong. The jungle had gone silent. No rustling leaves. No chirping insects. No distant howls of nocturnal predators. Only stillness. Joran scanned their surroundings, her grip tightening on her spear. Something was hunting them. Then, she smelled it, a damp, metallic stench. Her blood ran cold. Kryn. Ethan gave her a sharp look. That's supposed to mean something. Joran's voice was barely above a whisper. They are death. A moment later, the shadows moved. A sleek, elongated form unfurled from the underbrush, its exoskeleton gleaming black in the bioluminescent light. 6 razor-sharp limbs unfolded, each ending in serrated claws. Its eyeless face twitched toward them, sensing their presence through heat and movement. Ethan swore under his breath. That's a big bug. Joran didn't move. She knew what this was. A Kryn stalker. She had fought them before. They were fast, brutal, and relentless. Even a single one was a nightmare to bring down. Ethan, however, wasn't waiting for her assessment. He moved. Joran barely had time to process his actions before he was charging the creature. Her jaw dropped in shock. What kind of fool charges a Kryn? The beast screeched and lunged, claws slashing through the air. Ethan dove under its swipe, rolling smoothly to his feet. Before it could react, he twisted, driving a combat knife deep into the creature's side. The Kryn shrieked in rage, but Ethan was already gone, slipping out of its range before it could counter. Joran had never seen anyone fight like that. His movements were raw and instinctive, yet efficient and precise. He didn't waste energy. Every motion was calculated for survival. Her grip on her spear tightened. He was a hunter. The Kryn whipped toward Ethan, its mandibles clicking furiously. Joran cursed under her breath. She wouldn't let a human outdo her. With a roar, she launched herself forward. The Kryn turned just as Joran vaulted onto its back, her spear flashing in the dim light. She drove the blade deep into its neck, piercing through the thick carapace. The beast let out one last choked screech before it collapsed, its body twitching in its death throes. Panting, Joran wrenched her spear free and turned to Ethan. He was already watching her, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Not bad, he admitted. You're fast. Joran flicked Kryn blood from her spear. And you are reckless. Ethan grinned. Maybe. But it worked. Joran studied him for a long moment. He had faced down a Kryn without hesitation. Most warriors, even Zevrin, feared these creatures. But Ethan had fought it like it was just another challenge. Like her. A realization struck her then. He wasn't prey. He never was. She took a slow step toward him, golden eyes narrowing. What are you, human? Ethan met her gaze evenly. A survivor. Joran exhaled through her nose, considering his answer. Survivor. The word settled strangely in her chest. The Zevrin took pride in their hunting prowess, in their ability to dominate. But Ethan had proven himself in battle. He had earned his place beside her. For the first time in her life, Joran felt the stirrings of something dangerous. Respect. She tilted her head. Perhaps I misjudged you, Ethan Cole. Ethan smirked. Glad to hear it. Now, let's get moving before another one of those things shows up. Joran nodded. The hunt wasn't over. But now. She wasn't sure if she was the predator. Or the prey. A hunter's honor. The jungle swallowed them again, thick vines and towering trees forming a natural fortress of tangled roots and shadows. Joran moved with ease, her golden eyes scanning every flickering movement, every shift in the wind. Beside her, Ethan walked just as confidently, a human moving like a predator in a world that should have devoured him. It unsettled her. She had thought him prey. That illusion had shattered the moment he dodged her spear. The moment he had charged a Kryn instead of running. The moment he had survived. Now, she watched him closely, studying his every move. He was like her. And that made him dangerous. Ethan suddenly slowed, raising a fist, a silent signal. Joran immediately stopped. A second later, she heard it. Footsteps. Not from them. Not from anything natural. Joran turned her head slightly, just enough to pick up the scent. A cold rush ran down her spine. More Zevrin. Her own kind. Ethan caught her look and frowned. Friends of yours? Joran's lips curled in a humorless smirk. Not exactly. A shadow flickered through the undergrowth, then another. They were surrounded. Joran exhaled slowly, then stepped forward. Come out, she commanded. The jungle obeyed. 6 Zevrin warriors emerged, their armor gleaming in the bioluminescent glow. Each carried a weapon, some spears, some blades, but all moved with the same deadly precision she did. At the center of them stood Dakar. Joran's stomach twisted. Dakar was one of the High Huntmasters, a ruthless leader known for his lack of mercy. His dark, obsidian eyes locked onto her first, then flickered to Ethan. Joran, he said smoothly, as if he had expected her. You've strayed far from the hunting grounds. Joran tightened her grip on her spear. I am on my own hunt. Dakar's gaze shifted to Ethan again, this time with open curiosity. A human. He stepped closer, nostrils flaring. Interesting. I thought their kind were weak. Ethan sighed. You know, I'm starting to get really tired of hearing that. Dakar smirked. And yet, you live. Curious. Joran took a step forward, subtly positioning herself between Dakar and Ethan. What do you want? Dakar's smirk faded. You should be asking yourself that question, Joran. You were sent on a hunt, and yet I find you here, traveling beside your prey. Joran's muscles tensed. He was testing her. She could feel the other warriors watching, waiting. If she showed weakness, if she faltered for even a second, they would tear Ethan apart. She didn't understand why the thought made her stomach tighten. But it did. She held Dakar's gaze. He is not prey. Dakar's head tilted slightly, considering. Then what is he? Joran hesitated. The answer should have been simple. A captive. A challenge. A study. But none of those words fit anymore. She settled on the truth. A warrior. Dakar let out a quiet chuckle. A human warrior. That is amusing. Ethan, to his credit, didn't react. He simply crossed his arms and muttered, real original. Joran ignored him, keeping her focus on Dakar. The older Huntmaster took a slow step forward, lowering his spear slightly. If that is true, Joran, then prove it. Joran's pulse quickened. What do you mean? Dakar's smirk was cold. You claim he is a warrior? Then let him fight for his right to live. The jungle fell silent. Ethan let out a slow breath. Why do I feel like I just got volunteered for something? Joran clenched her jaw. This was the Zevrin way. The strong survived, the weak fell. Dakar was challenging Ethan's worth in the most brutal, final way possible. She turned to Ethan, speaking low so only he could hear. You do not have to do this. Ethan met her gaze, unreadable. Then, he grinned. Joran, I don't think I've ever not had to do something. Before she could stop him, he stepped forward. I accept. Dakar's smirk grew. He motioned to one of the warriors, a massive brute with thick, dark fur and twin serrated blades strapped to his back. Curl. Joran's heart clenched. If Ethan had any chance of winning, it wasn't against Curl. But Ethan? He simply rolled his shoulders and loosened his stance. All right, he muttered. Let's see what we're working with. Curl grinned and unsheathed his blades. The fight began. Curl moved fast. For his size, he was shockingly quick, his blades flashing in the dim light. Ethan barely dodged the first strike. Joran saw it, the smallest hesitation in his step. He wasn't used to fighting enemies this fast. Curl capitalized on it. He feinted left, then slammed a knee into Ethan's ribs, sending him sprawling. Joran's grip tightened on her spear. Get up, human. Ethan coughed, rolling to his feet. His grin was gone now, replaced by sharp, focused determination. Curl rushed him again, blade sweeping forward. And Ethan ducked. The movement was instinctive, perfect. He twisted under the strike and surged forward, slamming his elbow into Curl's throat. Curl choked. Ethan moved again, spinning into a brutal kick that sent Curl staggering back. Joran's breath hitched. He had adapted. Curl recovered quickly, snarling. He came at Ethan again, faster, his blades blurring. Ethan didn't block. He redirected. He used Curl's own momentum against him, sidestepping at the last second and slamming his foot into the warrior's knee. A sickening crack echoed through the jungle. Curl collapsed. Silence. Dakar's smirk faded. Ethan exhaled, rolling his shoulders. Well, he said. That was fun. Joran barely heard him. She was too busy staring at him, at the impossible thing he had just done. He had beaten a Zevrin warrior. A human had won. Dakar studied Ethan for a long moment, then chuckled. Impressive. He turned to Joran, his expression unreadable. It seems you were right. Joran didn't speak. Because she didn't know what to say. She had never believed she would see a human prove the Zevrin wrong. Yet here he stood. Ethan met her gaze, his smirk returning. That good enough for you, Huntmaster? Joran's heart pounded. For the first time in her life, she wasn't sure who was hunting who. The challenge of equals. The jungle felt different now. Joran couldn't quite explain it, but something had shifted. Ethan had done the unthinkable, he had defeated a Zevrin warrior in fair combat. And not just any warrior, but Curl. A fighter who had bested even the most seasoned hunters. And yet, a human, a so-called weak creature, had stood his ground. Dakar, the High Huntmaster, regarded Ethan with renewed interest. The other warriors, though silent, betrayed their unease with flicking tails and stiff postures. This had never happened before. Joran saw it in their eyes, uncertainty. Ethan had proven himself as more than prey. Dakar finally spoke, his deep voice cutting through the thick tension. You have fought well, human. Ethan wiped the blood from his lip and smirked. Not bad for prey, huh? Dakar's lips curled slightly, but there was no amusement in his expression. You are more than we expected. But a single victory does not make you an equal. Ethan exhaled, rolling his shoulders. Didn't think it would. Joran felt the weight of what was coming next before Dakar even said it. Then prove it. Joran tensed. Of course. Defeating Curl had earned Ethan respect, but respect among the Zevrin was never given freely. It had to be tested. Dakar stepped forward, his spear shifting in his hands. This was a true challenge now. Ethan's victory had set something into motion, something dangerous. Joran knew Dakar well. He did not fight for sport. He fought for dominance, for absolute control. And now, he meant to test Ethan to the limit. Ethan sighed, glancing at Joran. This guy's not gonna just walk away, is he? Joran shook her head. No. Ethan exhaled. Yeah. Didn't think so. Dakar studied him. Do you accept? Ethan met his gaze evenly. No hesitation. I accept. Joran clenched her fists. She wasn't sure why she felt so on edge. It wasn't as if she doubted Ethan's ability. He had already surprised her once. But this was Dakar. And Dakar didn't hold back. The duel begins. Dakar moved first. Unlike Curl, Dakar was not brute strength. He was precision. His spear flashed forward, striking faster than a viper. Ethan barely dodged in time, twisting just enough for the blade to graze his side instead of impaling him. Joran's breath caught. Too fast. Ethan recovered quickly, but Dakar was relentless. His strikes came in rapid succession, each one meant to kill. Ethan blocked one, dodged another, then spun low, aiming a kick at Dakar's knee. Dakar didn't fall for it. He leapt back, his tail lashing out and striking Ethan across the face. Ethan stumbled. Dakar's spear came down in a blur. Joran moved before she even realized it. Her hand clamped onto Dakar's spear mid-strike. The jungle fell silent. All eyes turned to her. Her heart pounded. What have I done? Dakar stared at her, unreadable. Joran felt Ethan's gaze on her, but she couldn't meet it. A Zevrin never interfered in a challenge. It was a law. And yet, she had. Dakar's voice was dangerously quiet. You would defend him? Joran released the spear and stepped back, her pulse hammering in her throat. I. She swallowed. He has already proven himself. Dakar's gaze sharpened. Or have you grown weak? A deep growl rumbled from Joran's chest. No one called her weak. But she couldn't explain why she had stopped the fight. She looked at Ethan. He wasn't glaring, wasn't scolding her, just watching. Trying to understand. Dakar's tail flicked once. Then, his smirk returned. Interesting, he said. Very interesting. He turned back to Ethan. You are lucky, human. It seems you have earned the loyalty of a Huntmaster. That is a rare thing. Joran bristled. That is not. Then prove it, Dakar interrupted. Kill him yourself. The jungle held its breath. Joran froze. The world around her seemed to slow. Ethan had gone still, waiting. Dakar was testing her now. Not Ethan. Her. She had called the human a warrior. She had interfered in his challenge. Now, Dakar demanded she finish what she started. She knew what she should do. Kill the human. Reclaim her honor. But she couldn't. She didn't know why, and that terrified her. Dakar's eyes gleamed, as if he had expected this. You hesitate. Joran's grip on her spear tightened. Ethan was still watching her. No fear, no pleading. Just understanding. You have made your choice, Huntmaster, Dakar said smoothly. And so has he. Then he turned to his warriors. Leave them. Joran's head snapped up. What? Dakar smiled, but it wasn't warm. The jungle will decide their fate. Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the trees. One by one, the warriors followed. Until only Joran and Ethan remained. A choice that changed everything. The silence stretched between them. Joran exhaled, shoulders tense. She had failed the test. She had hesitated. And that hesitation had marked her. She felt lost. Then, Ethan's voice broke the quiet. So. She turned to him. He rubbed his jaw. Not gonna lie. I was about 5 seconds away from dying. Joran exhaled sharply. You talk too much. Ethan grinned. Yeah, well. Keeps me alive. Joran looked away. You should not be alive. Ethan considered that. And yet, here I am. She turned to face him again, searching his expression. He had stood against her kind and won. But he had never once tried to kill her. And she had saved him. Joran took a slow breath, forcing down the storm in her chest. Ethan watched her. So, what now? Joran hesitated. Then, for the first time in her life, she admitted the truth. I don't know. Ethan's grin softened. Guess we'll figure it out, then. Joran studied him for a long moment. She had never been uncertain before. She had always known her path, her place. But now, she wasn't so sure. And for some reason, that didn't terrify her as much as it should have. The prey that fights back. Joran led the way through the dense jungle, her golden eyes scanning the terrain as Ethan followed closely behind. The jungle was alive with distant growls and the flutter of unseen wings, but Joran barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere. She had done the unthinkable. She had spared a human. And now, she was walking beside him as an equal. Ethan had changed everything. He had fought when he should have fallen. He had refused to submit. And worst of all, she had interfered. She had chosen him. Joran exhaled sharply, pushing the thought away. It didn't matter. She just needed to figure out her next move. Still brooding. Ethan's voice pulled her from her thoughts. She shot him a glare. I do not brood. He smirked. Right. You just stare off into the distance dramatically while ignoring me. Totally different. Joran's tail flicked in irritation. You are insufferable. Ethan chuckled. And yet, here we are. Joran wanted to snap at him, to tell him she wasn't here by choice. But that was a lie. She could have left him behind. Could have walked away the moment Dakar did. And yet, she hadn't. Because she wasn't done with him yet. She needed to understand why. Why he had survived. Why he had won. Why he made her hesitate. The jungle thinned slightly as they reached a clearing. Joran stopped and scanned the area. Ethan stretched. All right. Time for the obvious question. Joran crossed her arms. What question? What now? He met her gaze. Your people left us to die. You had a chance to kill me, and you didn't. So what happens next? Joran didn't answer immediately. She had no idea. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. You confuse me, human. Ethan grinned. That's kinda my thing. Joran narrowed her eyes. I am not joking. Neither am I. Ethan's voice softened. Look, Joran. I get it. This isn't how things were supposed to go. You were supposed to kill me, and I was supposed to just die like a good little prey animal, right? Joran's jaw clenched. You are not prey. Ethan's smile faded. Then stop treating me like one. Joran exhaled slowly. She had no response to that. Because he was right. She had called him a warrior. Treated him like an equal. But deep down, she had still been waiting for him to fail. Waiting for him to prove himself weak. But he never did. I don't know what you are, Ethan Cole. She met his gaze. But I know you are not what I expected. Ethan tilted his head. That a compliment? She hesitated. Then, reluctantly, she nodded. Ethan grinned. I'll take it. Joran rolled her eyes. Why was he like this? But before she could question it further, the ground trembled. Joran froze. Ethan frowned. That normal? Joran didn't answer. Because she knew this sound. It wasn't an earthquake. It was something worse. A shadow fell over the clearing as something massive emerged from the jungle. A Targash. Joran's blood ran cold. Ethan let out a low whistle. That's a big lizard. It was bigger than a lizard. The Targash was an apex predator, the top of the food chain. Covered in thick, bone-plated armor, standing 3 times taller than any Zevrin, and armed with jaws strong enough to snap a warrior in half. Joran had hunted many things. But even she would think twice before challenging a Targash. It turned its massive head, golden eyes locking onto them. Ethan exhaled. I'm guessing running isn't an option. Joran didn't look away from the beast. It only chases what flees. Ethan sighed. So, what? We fight? Joran tightened her grip on her spear. Unless you have a better idea. Ethan grinned. You're asking me for ideas? I thought I was the stupid human. Joran's tail flicked. You are. But you are also alive. So speak quickly. The Targash took a slow, heavy step forward. The ground shook beneath them. Ethan glanced around, thinking fast. All right. If we can't outrun it, we need to make it think we're not worth the effort. Joran frowned. And how do you propose we do that? Ethan studied the Targash. It's an ambush predator, right? Hunts by sight and sound. Joran nodded. And heat. Ethan snapped his fingers. Perfect. We blind it. Joran arched a brow. Blind it? Ethan grinned. I hope you like explosions. Joran blinked. What? Ethan was already moving, pulling something from his belt, a small metallic device. Joran tensed. What is that? Ethan smirked. Something I built when I realized I was stuck on an alien death planet. Joran's eyes widened slightly. This human had built weapons. Ethan adjusted something on the device and tossed it toward the Targash. The moment it hit the ground. A blinding flash erupted, followed by a deafening blast. Joran hissed, shielding her eyes as the Targash roared in confusion. Ethan grabbed her wrist. Now. Move. Joran didn't argue. They bolted for the tree line as the massive beast thrashed behind them, blinded and disoriented. By the time the Targash regained its senses, they were gone. They didn't stop running until they were deep in the jungle again. Joran finally skidded to a halt, her chest heaving. Ethan leaned against a tree, grinning. Well, he said. That was fun. Joran turned to him, still processing what had just happened. You built that? Ethan shrugged. Had to. Not exactly a lot of options out here. Joran stared at him. He had survived. Alone. 4 weeks. He had built traps. He had fought Zevrin warriors. He had faced down a Targash. And he had won. Joran's tail flicked slowly. You are not prey, she murmured again, almost to herself. Ethan smirked. Took you long enough to figure that out. Joran exhaled sharply. I do not like you. Ethan grinned. You keep saying that, and yet here we are. Joran rolled her eyes, but there was no real anger behind it. She had set out to hunt a human. Instead, she had found something else entirely. Something she wasn't sure she understood yet. But she was going to. No matter what it took. The hunter becomes the hunted. The jungle was dark now, the twin moons of this world casting long shadows through the towering trees. Joran and Ethan moved in near silence, their footsteps light on the moss-covered ground. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, distant rain, and something else. They were being followed. Joran's golden eyes flicked toward the darkness behind them. She hadn't said anything yet, but she knew Ethan could feel it too. His posture was different, tense, coiled like a predator ready to strike. It was strange. She had started this hunt believing him to be prey. Now, she wasn't so sure who the real prey was. Ethan adjusted his grip on his knife. So, he said, his voice low. Are we gonna talk about the fact that someone's tailing us, or are we just gonna pretend we don't notice? Joran didn't look at him. You noticed? Ethan smirked. I've spent the last month trying not to get eaten by everything on this planet. You get real good at knowing when something's watching you. Joran exhaled. He was right. Whoever was following them was skilled, Zevrin skilled. No normal predator moved like this. Which meant one thing. Dakar had changed his mind. Joran clenched her jaw. We need to move faster. Ethan shot her a look. That bad, huh? Joran didn't answer. Instead, she picked up her pace. Ethan followed without hesitation. The jungle blurred past them as they moved in sync, dodging low branches, leaping over fallen logs. They weren't just running now. They were hunting their hunter. Joran's ears twitched. A whisper of movement. A breath of air displaced behind them. She spun, just as a blade came whistling toward her throat. Joran ducked. The warrior landed in a crouch, their obsidian eyes gleaming in the dim moonlight. Zevrin. Joran's stomach twisted. She knew this one. Rika. A huntmaster in training, just below Joran in rank. Fast. Ruthless. And loyal to Dakar. Rika didn't hesitate. She lunged again, twin daggers flashing in the dark. Joran met her head-on, their blades clashing in a shower of sparks. Ethan didn't wait. He moved. Two more Zevrin warriors burst from the trees, aiming for him. The first never had a chance. Ethan twisted, grabbing the warrior's wrist mid-strike and flipping him over his shoulder. The Zevrin hit the ground hard, stunned just long enough for Ethan to slam an elbow into his temple. The second one was faster. His spear jabbed forward. Ethan sidestepped, grabbing the shaft and yanking it forward, forcing the Zevrin off balance. Joran saw it all in an instant. He wasn't fighting like a human. He was fighting like them. Like a Zevrin. Rika saw it too. Her golden eyes flickered with something sharp, almost like alarm. Joran didn't let her recover. She spun her spear low, hooking Rika's ankle and yanking her feet out from under her. Rika hit the ground hard, but she rolled with it, landing on one knee. Her gaze snapped up to Joran, her expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, Rika's lips curled. You really have fallen, Joran. Joran's grip tightened. I made a choice. Rika smirked. A foolish one. She shot forward, too fast. Joran braced, but Rika wasn't aiming for her. She was going for Ethan. Joran's stomach dropped. Ethan didn't flinch. The moment Rika lunged, he reacted. He caught her wrist, using her own momentum to spin her around, and then he drove his knee into her stomach. Rika gasped, staggering back. She barely had time to recover before Ethan was on her again. He moved like a warrior. Like a predator. Like one of them. Joran watched, something deep in her chest stirring. Rika saw it too. And she didn't like it, she bared her teeth. He fights like us. Joran exhaled slowly. Yes. Rika's eyes narrowed. That is dangerous. Joran knew what she meant. It was one thing for a human to survive. One thing for a human to fight. But for a human to adapt. To become something more. That was a threat. Rika took a slow step back, calculating. Then, to Joran's surprise, she smiled. This is not over, Huntmaster. She vanished into the trees. The others followed. Just like that, they were gone. The jungle was silent again. Joran exhaled, feeling her muscles finally unclench. Ethan watched the trees. So, they just gave up. Joran shook her head. No. This was a warning. Ethan frowned. They're afraid. Joran didn't answer. Because she wasn't sure if Rika had been afraid of Ethan. Or if she had been afraid of what Ethan was becoming. Something more. They walked in silence for a while after that, moving deeper into the jungle. Finally, Ethan spoke. So. Joran sighed. What? Ethan smirked. Are we gonna talk about how I just beat a trained alien warrior in combat? Joran rolled her eyes. She was testing us. That was not a real fight. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Sure felt real. Joran exhaled. You are learning. Ethan grinned. So you admit I'm getting better? Joran shot him a look. You are acceptable. Ethan barked a laugh. I'll take it. Joran shook her head, but there was something almost like amusement in her chest. Then, Ethan's grin faded. They're coming back, aren't they? Joran's amusement died instantly. She nodded. Ethan exhaled. All right. So what's the plan? Joran hesitated. Because for the first time in her life, she didn't know. Her people would never accept this. Never accept him. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to leave him behind. She had started this hunt with a simple goal, track and kill the human. Now, she was walking beside him. Fighting with him. Protecting him. And she wasn't sure if she wanted to stop. Joran's fingers tightened around her spear. We survive, she said finally. Ethan smirked. Simple plan. I like it. Joran looked at him. She wasn't sure who was leading who anymore. But for now, she would keep walking. And she would find out. The breaking of the hunt. The jungle air was thick with tension, the distant hum of nocturnal creatures barely audible over the pounding of Joran's heart. She and Ethan moved through the tangled underbrush in silence, but neither of them relaxed. Rika would return. Joran had no doubt about that. She had seen it in Rika's eyes, the flicker of something dangerous. Not just hostility. Not just rivalry. Fear. Not of Ethan. But of what he was becoming. And that made him a threat. The betrayal. The sky above was shifting, the twin moons now hidden behind thick clouds. The air smelled of coming rain. Ethan sighed. All right, Joran. Cards on the table. How screwed are we? Joran exhaled. That depends. Ethan smirked. On. She met his gaze. On whether you can keep up. Ethan grinned. I think I've proven I can. Joran's tail flicked. Perhaps. She didn't want to admit it, but she believed him. She had spent her whole life hunting. Prey ran. Prey begged. Prey died. But Ethan had never run. He had never begged. And despite everything, he still stood. That unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. She had thought she understood strength. Now, she wasn't so sure. The Zevrin return. The attack came just before dawn. Joran felt it before she heard it. The jungle shifted. The creatures went silent. And then, blades in the dark. Joran reacted instinctively, twisting just as a dagger whistled past her head. She spun, her spear flashing out, meeting steel. Rika was fast. But this time, so was Joran. Their weapons clashed in a blur of silver and sparks, their golden eyes locked. You should have killed him, Rika hissed. Joran bared her teeth. He is not prey. Rika snarled. Then he is a threat. Joran didn't answer. Because she knew. The others attacked, coming for Ethan. But Ethan was ready. He moved like one of them now. No wasted movement. No hesitation. Just pure instinct. One warrior lunged, Ethan dodged, grabbing their wrist and twisting until the blade fell from their grip. Another attacked from behind, Ethan ducked, spun, and drove his knife into the warrior's exposed side. Joran watched. And for the first time, she truly understood. Ethan wasn't adapting to become one of them. He was adapting to survive them. And that was even more dangerous. Rika must have seen it too. Because she faltered. Joran saw the opening. She struck. Her spear whistled through the air, stopping inches from Rika's throat. The jungle went still. Joran held Rika's gaze. Leave. Rika's tail lashed. You would betray your own kind for him. Joran didn't blink. No. I would betray no one. Her grip tightened. But I will not stand by while you hunt a man who has already proven himself. Rika's lips curled, her golden eyes flashing. But she didn't move. And then, just like before, she left. The other warriors hesitated. Then, one by one, they followed. Joran let out a slow breath, her body tense. It was done. For now. The choice. Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Well, he muttered. That was fun. Joran shot him a look. You are infuriating. Ethan smirked. I get that a lot. Joran sighed. They will return. Ethan nodded. Yeah. I figured. He met her gaze. So what now? Joran hesitated. She could still walk away. Return to her people. Return to the life she knew. But the life she knew had already changed. Joran met Ethan's gaze. And made her choice. We go together. Ethan blinked. You sure? Joran exhaled. No. Ethan grinned. That's a first. Joran rolled her eyes. Come. The hunt is over. Ethan followed. For the first time, they walked together. And for the first time, Joran wasn't leading. She was simply moving forward. With him.